I'm here at PC Extreme, a data house in Amsterdam, where hundreds of thousands of websites live. And I talk here with Wido from Hollander, and he's the founder of the company. He started it, and he's the first person who had a Model S where the SSD chip in the eMMC failed. And it's a fascinating story. He has a lot of technical background, why it failed and what he did, and so we're going to talk about that, Wido. When did you? What does PC Extreme do here?
Well, we're a hosting company founded here in the Netherlands. We host about a few 100,000 websites, from small businesses to large businesses in our data centers. And
I found out that all my websites, Vincent Efforts and Self-Sturing and all these files, they are here and they live here peacefully and nicely. Okay, so in your daily work, you do a lot with hard disk and hardware and failure rates, etc.
Yeah, so in a data center, we use SSDs, which are actually eMMC chips like you find in a car, and we use those SSDs in our servers, and they have a finite life. So I'm actually used to having a finite life for storage.
Yeah, and you know exactly what runs on it, and etc. Yeah. Now, you had one of the first Teslas in the Netherlands, right? Which one was that, and what did you have?
I think number 22. It was a Model S 85 in 2013, September. Yeah,
September, and I had one in November, so I was really behind him. Okay, but you drive a lot, right? You live. How many miles do you do?
Oh, miles. I think about 30,000 miles, so 50,000 kilometers a year. Yeah.
And then at a certain point, you come to the conclusion this car will fail, and not because of the drivetrain or the batteries, but because of what?
Yeah. So I actually was investigating how the MCU was working, because I know it's a Linux system, and years ago I already hacked my Model S because there was a leak in the software, so you could go into the MCU and log in. So I was investigating how it worked, and I know it was running Ubuntu Linux, actually a forked derivative of Ubuntu Linux, and then I figured out, hey, there's this small chip where the operating system is on. And from my work, I know if you keep writing log lines like diagnostic data to a chip, it will fail at some point. Anybody playing with a Raspberry Pi knows that the SD card in Raspberry Pi will fail at some point. So I figured out, well, this chip will probably fail at some point, and what will it do with the car?
Yeah, because what's on that SSD? What's on the SSD chip?
On the SSD chip is the operating system. So like your Windows or your Mac OS X, the operating system of the MCU itself is on that chip. It's not the drivetrain, so it doesn't involve anything of the motor or the brakes or anything of autopilot. If you have autopilot,
Linux is basically Ubuntu. Linux is booted from it, but that's only and they have updates from that, so that's being written. But what else is written on the chip, which basically make that after a couple of thousand times it fails?
Okay, so if you look at the log lines, it will just print a line saying, okay, battery state is 85%. It will say door open, door close, and it will say all kinds of stuff and saying GPS position, a Wi-Fi cellular connection, a signal strength, the 4G.
3000 would be in a couple of hours.
Yeah, well, it's about, if the chip is a few gigabytes in size, so the chip is 8 gigabytes in size, and if you can usually write to it a couple of thousand times, it would be 8 gigabytes multiplied by a couple of thousand times.
Oh, okay.
So a small line of text is a few bytes, maybe a few kilobytes. So that's not that much data.
Yeah. So, but I mean, here you are, and this was 2019. You come to the conclusion this chip will fail, right? I mean, that was your fear.
Yeah, and we have two Model S, and I drive the newest Model S, and my wife mainly drives the old Model S. And she kept complaining to me, saying the Bluetooth doesn't work, or it keeps failing, or the screen stays black, and navigation is lagging, Spotify is lagging, etc., etc. So I figured, this might be a problem with that chip. So then I started investigating on how it worked, and I found this small post from somebody somewhere on the internet saying that he found a way to copy his chip, and then he described a bit how the chip worked internally. I thought, oh, that's pretty easy. We can just rip out the computer and replace the chip. So I contacted Luke. You know the guy in the Netherlands.
Yeah, Luke was the guy who saved me last Friday because my screen got black. I had to wait 2 months for Tesla to even have an appointment. And he says, I'm coming from Eindhoven, which is the other side of the Netherlands. He came to me and he basically took the chip out. We spent an hour and he basically repaired it. Next day I drove to it, and I basically was in 2 days I was up and running. I didn't have to pay 3000, but about 500. It was wonderful, fantastic service, great guy. All the videos are online, both in English and in Dutch. A very step-by-step description. I'll also make sure it becomes English. So that's Luke from Eindhoven, and he was your partner in crime, helping you.
Yeah, so we came up with a plan because he said, I never replaced this chip. Shall we do your car for the first time? I said, well, yeah, let's try. Let's see where it ends up. And we knew there's some sensitive data on the chip. So all the data on the chip is generic. It's just the same firmware for every car. However, for the app to work, so for your app to unlock the car, it uses some VPN certificates. I think everybody knows what a VPN is. Usually we have a credentials like a username, password, but each car has a unique certificate stored on the chip. It's a very tiny file. It's tiny, but if
it's 2K.
2K, it's something like that. But if you don't have that file, the car works, but your app won't work, and you won't get any software updates anymore.
Correct.
So before we actually were,
Tesla can basically log in and update that remotely, right? I mean, they could basically change the certificate and put it back.
Yeah, well, you need to go to a service center because using a diagnostics cable, they can log into the system and put that certificate back because they make a backup of the certificates. Actually, they are what we call the certificate authority. They provide the certificates, so they have them.
So there's bad for you. It was important to basically read it. So how do you read? It? I mean, I looked at the card. I will put it online, and it's just a little NVIDIA board with a little chip in it, right? I mean, that's a standard board they buy.
The chip is like this in size. It's a thumb size. So you need to desolder the chip, get it from the board, and then it's a standard chip. The chip is used in phones and all kinds of embedded applications, as we call it. You can buy these chips, and it's from Hynix. You can just go to Mouser Electronics and buy the chip, exactly the chip as Tesla is using. So, but if you want to read it, you can go. You have these programmers. AllSocket is one of the brands. You put them into your USB drive of your computer, USB port, put in the chip, and then it pops up with some special software, with very regular software. You can just read out the chip, get all the data from it, copy all the bits, put in a new chip, and then write all the bits back to a new chip, and then solder the chip back on the board.
Yeah, and when there's little errors on the chip, you basically can take the image of the chip is available online. You can just download it, put the new certificate on, and write it on the chip.
Yeah. So on GitHub, one of the websites where a lot of free software is distributed, I have a script, and I think a lot of users are using it now to generate a new blank image for a Tesla. You run the script, and it builds a new image of 8 GB with all the basic stuff in there. You just need to put in your certificates, and then write that image to the chip and put it in your car.
Yeah. Okay. So you had a plan.
Yeah.
And last year you were going, okay, we're going to basically to solder this chip out. Luke knows everything about fixing phones. He knows everything about how to do that kind of stuff. And then what happened?
Okay, so we postponed it a few times to replace the chip in my car because I was getting married last summer and I was moving to a new house. So I was busy with all kinds of stuff, and the car was not my highest priority at that moment. And then the chip died before we could actually replace it.
You ordered all the parts?
I had a new chip, I had the reader, I had all the stuff, and then in the process the chip died, and then that was it. So we built a new chip for my car, a 64GB chip instead of the 8GB. We built a new software on it, put it in the car, and put it in, and the car was driving again. However, I lost the VPN certificates, so my car had no connection anymore with the Tesla network.
And you say also the chip died, so if you put it in there in the holder, you couldn't reach the chip anymore. It was completely dead.
It was completely dead. Yeah, no communication with the chip anymore. It was dead. Okay. Yeah, but the car was running.
So you go to Tesla and saying, I have my certificate back, and basically put it in there?
No, I went the other route. So I went to Tesla, I created a service request and saying, hey, the app doesn't work anymore for my car. Can you please take a look at it? Because if you tell them that you did start soldering in your own car, then
all the bells are ringing.
So, and we knew, Luke and I knew, because we got a service manual from inside Tesla, that there's a procedure to reinstall a vehicle and then get the certificates back on it. So I figured, well, hopefully they will see the light and they'll just do that procedure. Yeah. I'll pay them for 2-3 hours of work, and then I'll be gone again, and my problem is fixed. Yeah. And they told me, sorry, your MCU is dead. You need to buy a new one. It's 3,000 euros. Yeah.
That little board, little board has a little chip, and that little chip has a little bit, 2 certificates, and they didn't know how to do it, or they didn't want to do it.
No, I think they didn't want to do it. So, and the little chip is, if you buy it in bulk, about 10 euros. And they charge 3,000 euros for a completely new computer, while this tiny chip has failed on the computer.
So then you basically said, hey, I mean, everything works fine. I just want to have... Did you then open up and told them?
I went to a different service center to try again because I knew there was not a very good communication between those service centers. I went to Tilburg and then I tried again and they said, no, you really need to replace the computer. I said, well, I think that actually I lost my VPN certificates. If you could just put those back. And I had the service manual printed from Tesla with me and I gave it to them. I said, can you please follow procedure 2.1 and do this? And he walked away and he went to my car. And 10 minutes later, the manager came back and he said, where did you get this manual? I said, well, I got it from
on the interwebs, yeah.
Somewhere from an American Tesla employee. He said, who's his name? I said, I'm not going to tell you who gave me this. I'm just asking you, can you please do this procedure for me on my car?
But they were all getting all tough on you. This is confidential information. You cannot have it, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's all over the web and you basically have no idea who basically gave it to you. It's just somebody on them with a name.
Yeah. But I really think that they were well willing to help me, but they were not allowed to help me. So they got pulled back, and I even remotely put my car in called factory mode. You can put the car in factory mode. It shows very large factory mode on both screens because that opens the car up completely, so you can log in with they have what they call the MCU toolbox on their laptops there, where they can talk with the MCU and do all kinds of stuff and update the car, whatever. But it's easier if it's in factory mode. But yeah, they really ran away from the car as soon as it got into factory mode.
So they understood. At a certain point they understood, or basically America told them, don't mess with this.
Yeah, that's what they told them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're stuck with a beautiful car, but no updates and no app connection.
Yeah, so searching around on the internet, I found a data recovery company in Poland, and they said for 300 euros flat fee service, we will do data recovery on your chip. And I said, okay. So I did the chip on the mail, and I think in October, and I sent it to Poland, and I'm hoping for the best. And they gave me, their initial answer was, this chip is toast. There's nothing we can do anymore. But then they emailed me 2 days later, said, well, we think we have an idea, but we need to order the same chip as you already have. So the original 8GB Hynix chip, we need to take the controller from that chip and then read the data.
No kidding. They basically took the controller from one chip, put it on the other chip.
This tiny chip, and
miracle, man.
And he said, this is going to be 50 euros extra for the work. I said, I don't care, do it. And then it was silent for a long time, and after a month I emailed them again saying, hey, how things are going. Now it's going very, very, very slow. They could read with just bytes per second from the chip. It was so slow. And eventually in December they found a way to cool the chip down to minus 30 degrees. So in a special machine they cooled down the chip, and then they were able to read the chip, get the data from it. And I said, I'm just looking for 3 files in total. That's all I'm looking for. But they managed to recover about 80% of the data from my chip, including my VPN certificates.
2K you basically needed. Okay. Yeah. So that came, and now you put it back and it's in the car.
I put it back in the car and it's up and running again. It got the latest firmware updates and it's running happily as it was running before.
Okay. You flagged this. You basically went to a very known Dutch site where techies are together, tweakers, and you wrote an article about it, right?
Yeah, I wrote an article and then I tipped the front page redaction saying, hey, can you, maybe this is interesting. Yeah. And they wrote an article about it, and then you saw a lot of people, tweakers, replying, and they saying, yeah, duh, those chips fail if you write to them too much. Yeah. What a dumb. Yeah,
I saw it was about 400 comments, and everybody was really, it was very clear. It was not very difficult, and also it went spread around, right? The amount of news, basically.
I think international. Yeah, at that time it was about October last year. There was a lot of international media and local media writing about this issue because it was popping up everywhere. In the US, you see YouTubers. I think
Gadget was also with it, so then the back was.
And on the West Coast, on the East Coast, you have repair shops doing that. In the US, everybody's now aware of this problem because it will happen eventually to every vehicle running with MCU1.
Yeah, and that's how many cars?
I don't know, a few 100,000 cars?
200,000. I think if you look at from 2012 to 2018, the first quarter, then basically it's about 200,000 cars.
Yeah, probably 200,000 cars. Yeah, that's probably the case. Yeah.
And they basically still, and Tesla now has updated their policy. They now are they are aware, and they basically say, hey, we're sorry, we'll just repair it for free under warranty because it's a design mistake.
No. No, their policy is still that they are completely silent. They ignore the whole question, because before my chip failed, and I actually forgot to mention this, is I wrote to the Tesla HQ in Amsterdam, the European headquarters, saying this happened, my chip failed, I lost my VPN certificates. I give you 3 options.
Yeah.
Option 1, you do a reinstallation of my vehicle, and I'll pay for the hours. I'll just go to a service center of your choice, and you'll do a reinstall, and I'll pay for the labor. Option number 2, you email me the VPN certificates. Option 3, you provide me an MCU with a 50% discount.
You wanted to pay 1,500 for this.
I wanted to be reasonable with the options I gave them. Because I know
because you can refurbish the MCU, the eMMC, and they can basically reuse them.
Yeah, so that's the option I gave them, and then their answer was no, sorry. The only option is we give you free labor on the MCU installation, but there was would still be more than 2,000 euros for the MCU. And one of the things which strikes me is because I know from my daily work working with Linux and with storage, this is a very common problem, something you need to be aware of. This is a design flaw in the vehicle, and although my vehicle is out of warranty, if you are claiming that you build a vehicle which will run for a million miles, and
that was the Model 3. That was not the model. That was not the model. It was a
Was a model?
Yeah, the Model 3 is now it's saying the Model 3. So no, he didn't say the bad. But from a reasonable point of view, you know, I mean, and it really always happens after 80,000 kilometers and after 4 years, right?
Yeah, it will probably never, actually maybe within the 4 years, but it will always happen after the 80,000 kilometers, because it is, although a parked vehicle also still rides to it, if you don't use things like Tesla VI, or if you have enabled sleep mode, then it will take longer before it reaches that point, but it will at some point die.
They're very busy with Model 3, and they're busy with Cybertruck. They're doing very exciting things. They're doing fantastic work. It's really wonderful, and we both enjoy our car, right? We love Tesla.
I bought a second Model S.
Yeah, he bought a second Model S. We love Tesla. We just think that this is not quite reasonable. They are aware of the situation, right?
Yeah, they are aware, because
they read Engadget, but I mean, apart from that, you've seen signs.
Yeah, but I think I've seen, and I think other people have seen signs, is that they now have software in the MCU, which counts down. There's a wear level counter on the chip, and the chip itself counts down from 100 to 0, saying its lifespan, the wear leveling, and it will count down to 0. And they are now counting how far the chip is. I don't know if they actually do something with the number,
but they are basically in the car. There's software which basically reads that counter. So the moment it becomes in 10, 9, they know about it. They could say, hey, you know, basically we need to fix your car before.
They could say a vehicle needs service, contact Tesla. They could say this, and then they could make a backup of it or do something with it. But no, they're not.
Okay. You've also said that now this is pretty much known in America, right? It's pretty standard, and you can read it everywhere. And if you basically Google eMMC space Tesla, you basically get all the links and videos and YouTubes, etc. Have they changed some of their policies? I heard that if you lose your certificates, it was not so difficult for what you had to do in America to do that in America.
Yeah, so I heard 2 stories, and in the US there are mobile service rangers, from what I've heard, who simply replace the certificates, because with their laptop they can just download the certificates from Tesla HQ. They need to open a service request inside Tesla towards engineering, say for this VIN number I need the certificates, and then by email they'll get an encrypted file, and they can upload that file to the car, and then it works again.
Yeah. Okay. So that is basically happening. And are a lot of people providing this service, repairing the chip, putting a new chip in?
Yeah, if you look around on the internet, on Tesla Motors Club as well, there are around, like I said, in the East Coast, West Coast, in the US, a lot of companies doing these services, reading out the chips and then replacing the chips and building these MCUs again so that the cars run.
Yeah. So it is basically, there's a whole, that's good that the ecosystem picks it up. But what do you think Tesla should do?
Well, I think Tesla should just be honest and say, okay, we made a mistake and we'll help you if your chip fails. I'm not saying that they should provide it for free, because I know the car is outside of warranty. But in my case, you could say, yeah, sure, here are your certificates, get your car back online again and get it up and running again. And they still seem to be ignoring the fact that it is happening, instead of it's really happening out there with cars. And people pay premium years ago for an expensive vehicle. Yeah. And I kind of feel like we're left in the...
A car like that should be able to drive for 20 years without a problem. And a chip. It's really, I mean, I talked to a school which is basically educating car manufacturing, car monteurs, car technicians, and I told them this is the new normal. These are the problems which new cars get. They're computers on wheels, and if the SSD fails, you basically need to be able to replace it. It's completely other skill set.
Yeah, it's different, and I do understand that the people working at Tesla, they are probably might be mechanics and not computer engineers who are not aware of replacing such a small chip. I understand that Tesla is not going to do desoldering and soldering of chips in their service centers, but there's actually a tiny board. So there's the big MCU, and there's a tiny board which is a basic off-the-shelf board from NVIDIA. Yeah. Which they can replace.
Maybe $100.
Maybe 100. Let's say $200. That's about it. It's getting the MCU out, replacing that board, putting a new board, because the board contains the memory, the CPU, and then the eMMC.
Yeah. And then they can basically replace everything. They don't have to read it. It would be about a 200 euro, including all the work. It's maybe 250 euro to basically do it.
Yeah, let's call it 400, but it should not be 3,000 euros. Yeah. No.
And okay, so. What do we want from Tesla? What do we want from Tesla?
Just a bit of cooperation.
Yeah. Just basically say that this is possible and put this repair. I mean, I actually think all these people which were loyal to you, which gave you the 85, I think it should be an update for free. And but if you cannot do that, even though you have $1 billion in cash flow this quarter, I mean, doing great for great products, but then at least cooperate and sell us a new board and basically reinstall everything.
Yeah, and don't be so uptight about it. And I heard a story in Austria as well. Somebody called me from Austria last week, and he said, yeah, I went to the service center because he also lost his certificates. And the service center manager said, yeah, sure, we'll replace your certificates. We'll do this for you. Yeah. He went to the service center, came in, and then this manager said, sorry, but engineering US told me I cannot help you. You need to go.
Yeah. So if somebody in the service asks for the certificates, red flag, we don't cooperate.
Yeah, because it needs to be attached to the purchase of a new MCU. That's probably somewhere the vehicle needs to have a new MCU registered before engineering will provide you the certificates.
So I think this is a really interesting story. I mean, it's fantastic that you came up before the chip failed, that you said this will fail, and then it failed before that. So I think it's wonderful, and that the police guys with -30 were able to recover the chip. But this is a modern problem with cars. The cars are software, 50% software, 50% hardware, and all the maintenance and the warranties and the schedules, and also the honesty, the communication, because we get a lot of software updates, and then we get a teeny little bit of information about the functionality, but we don't get the real thing, right? I mean, you also have this 85. And there's another little thing with software which happened with that. What happened with that charging gate?
Oh yeah, charging gate. I'm not experiencing it that much personally because I mainly drive the new Model S. But the old Model S, it supercharges super slow since somewhere May, April last year. And Tesla made a change in the battery management system with this update, and now it charges way slower. And it's still
How much?
It charges at 50 kilowatts at max.
Oh, yeah. And if CHAdeMO speed, that's good enough for you going back to CHAdeMO.
Yeah, and if you're really lucky, it reaches 60, 70, but it mainly stays around.
People were complaining and screaming and, hey, this doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
And the answer from Tesla was, yeah, your battery is functioning normally, and that's it. And a lot of people found out that it's tied to a specific firmware version and probably related to a fire, but this is speculation, probably related to a fire which happened in I think in Asia somewhere. And yeah, Tesla.
We have very cool movies from Asia where Teslas in parking garages go burning them. It's really, but it had nothing to do. It was very few, and they basically didn't warn you about it.
No, that's my main problem. Working in IT, I usually for my software I get a big release note saying, hey, this is what we changed in the software, and you know, in the industry I work in, we get very detailed release notes. Okay, they could be smaller for a vehicle, but as I said, it's always new features, hallelujah, new games in the car, but never the honesty saying we reduced the charging speed of your vehicle to protect it against a possible fire.
Yeah. Okay, so there you have it. Software is becoming really an important part of every product. I mean, actually, every product becomes a service, and the software and the connection to the software, the connection to the cloud and the services and the updates is really becoming very important. So also how you deal with us. You know, when you do that with a phone or with a car, it's very important to basically be honest about us and to give us a choice. And we think that this is one of the things that Tesla is way ahead of everybody else. And they also should basically adapt to this new way of working and help us and work with us and basically give us a reasonable repair.
Yeah, be open and honest, and I think everybody will be very happy then.
Yeah. And that fits the whole character of Tesla. Okay, thanks very much for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome.